It's the driving force.
So this kind of, you talk about that this reveals a kind of a hidden fear of failure, abandonment, not feeling like you're enough. What else? Keep going.
Instead of facing the fears, that person kind of stays in limbo, postponing real intimacy indefinitely. But it does definitely, that's where the hidden fear is around the failure, fear of failure, the abandonment, and not really saying I'm not good enough. So that is kind of how the brain is processing
You know, a
there.
question just popped in my head. We didn't talk about this, but
What?
so we're talking about dating and relationships, which this also applies. But let's talk about remarriage. Whether you had maybe the death of a spouse, the loss of a spouse, or your first marriage ended in divorce. This would be applicable there too, as well, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. You would definitely probably deal with some fear of dealing with what you dealt with in the previous
Now I get it.
relationship.
I get if it was a divorce, but let's say if your first husband wife passed away, and obviously that's traumatic and painful. Could that be at the root? Maybe you don't even realize of why you don't connect with somebody else going forward.
I don't know if the death part would be. It would probably be more like a divorce,
Okay, okay.
not the death.
Because there could be I lost a spouse. I don't want to go through that again, but you don't think that's probably that big of
Not. I mean, some people do
yeah,
have
yeah.
that feeling, but no, I don't think that particular part. I think it would be more like a divorce
Okay, all right, keep going,
when
keep
there's
going.
been some type of trauma
Okay.
part.
So you talk about you encourage. What do you mean when you say, "Hey, I encourage the client to go deeper"? What does that
Right.
mean?
So I'll say, what would being ready actually look like for
Okay,
you?
okay, that
So
makes
we
sense.
could talk about that. And then I would say, like, what are you afraid of that might happen if you didn't take this step toward love? And I'll just get deeper into that
Okay,
so they
okay.
can, we can work on healing and just intentional growth.
Here's the thing: when you're dealing with believers who know the word, fear is not of the Lord. But hey, I'm sitting here looking at you. You're operating in a spirit of fear. So the people you talk to, or people in general, do you think they are aware that it boils down to fear?
Like I say, I don't usually not when we first get started, but once they have explained and expressed things to me, then I can show them where that fear is, and then they can acknowledge the fear and begin to work on
So
it.
they might start by saying, "I'm not operating from a spirit of fear," but you point out certain things which
Shows
helps them
them.
see.
hmm
Okay,
Usually, I give
okay.
them examples that they've given me.
Oh wow, wow, wow! Because have you say I've heard you say fear doesn't always shout. What's the rest? It's sometimes
Oh,
it whispers.
yeah.
Fear doesn't always shout. It sometimes whispers.
Okay, I don't know if I said that. Did I say
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I
I
heard
did.
you say that.
Oh,
Fear
okay.
doesn't always shout. It sometimes whispers.
Hmm.
But I can't remember the rest of. I can't remember your point. Oh, I know your point. Your point was the reason you may not recognize it is because it may be whispering through sabotage, criticism, or hesitation, the things that you've mentioned. But it's a still small voice whispering, and it's so subtle that you don't know that fear is what's making me have a
Res-
problem with commitment.
Right.
Okay.
How
Okay.
the behavior is expressed. Yeah.
Okay. Keep going. Keep going,
So
Teresa.
let's just look at this, the takeaway from this.
Okay.
So fear doesn't always shout. It often
I
whispers, like
just
we
said
said, through sabotage, criticism, and hesitation. But no, you didn't say it like I thought you were going to
that. Okay.
say it, so
Okay.
I didn't pick it up.
Okay.
So when I'm trying to help someone recognize that the whispers is the step toward freedom and connection, and that's what we want them to do. So there is three kind of, let's just say, I'll call them steps toward dealing with that, finding security in the face of fear. And the first thing is identifying core fears. So we look at it. We look at, before someone can feel secure, they must become aware of what's making them feel this, feel fear, feel unsafe.
Okay.
Right. So we figure out what is that. So the core fear often operates beneath the surface, and it shows up like what we said already: fear of abandonment,
Okay.
their rejection, or afraid, the fear of not being enough. These are some main things that I hear a lot.
Now,
The fear of losing control.
you have to dig it, or they don't come in saying, "I fear this one."
No, they don't. We usually have to dig and find
Okay.
this.
Okay. But through your digging, you uncover that this is what's okay. Keep going. Keep going.
And then the fear of being too much or not worth staying for.
Wait a minute now, you're confusing me. You said a fear of not being enough. Now you're saying a fear of being too much. I mean,
Or not.
there's a whole lot of fear going on here.
That's why we're identifying the core of it so
Okay.
that we can deal with it. And like I say, it all comes from what has happened in our past experience, right? In our it could be past relationships, it could have been some family thing, something that you've internalized as a belief. Something like you could say something like, "I have to be perfect to be loved."
Because that's what you were taught. That's what you learned. That's the behavior. It's like maybe as a child.
I'm gonna go somewhere, and this is not gonna be. I'm gonna be vulnerable.
Aren't
So,
you always being vulnerable?
well, more
You're gonna
so.
be more vulnerable than normal. Okay, all right. Wow, this.
Well,
I need to pause. Pause the
no,
episode?
no. I'm
Okay,
just
okay.
gonna
Okay,
say
go.
that was a fear, and this is gonna be a little difficult for me. But I had a fear of that I was going to always be overweight, and it's like it happened. Does that make sense? I had a fear. I felt like if I was a certain size, that's what it was. I would be more accepted. And if you know, in my growing up, in the years that I grew up, you got to see certain people. They were in their beautiful dresses, they were small, and I just said, and I needed to be a certain size, and then I would be more accepted. And that has driven me. I didn't get to the size I wanted to be, but that did drive me, and that was a fear. It was fear of, if I were just this size, I would be more accepted and loved. You had never said that, but that was in my brain. And that has been in my brain for years. Isn't that horrible? But I've changed it. I did change it when I went through counseling, when I went through counseling and went through my practicum and everything, and we went through counseling. So I released that, but it still was something that I did fear. And I was never good enough until I got to a certain size, but I let that go because I never did get to that size, but that was still there.
One,
So I'm just trying to show you
I
a
really
real
appreciate
point.
you being vulnerable.
Thank you.
So what you're saying is, and you and I are really, what's the word, concerned about, aware of, intentional about our fitness.
Hmm.
I mean, out of a week, we're working out 6 days,
Hmm.
sometimes 5, but mostly 6.
Hmm.
We're well, you more than me are careful about what you eat. But here's the point I want to make. So while we're not saying don't be aware of health and fitness,
Hmm.
don't strive for certain goals.
Hmm.
What we're saying, or you correct me if this is not what you're saying, that's not related to your self-worth.
Right. And don't be driven by the fear of, I need to be this or that to be a happy person or a joyous person or
And
accepted person.
yeah, wow. Okay.
But those are the little fears that can drive people. I mean, you hear it all the time. You hear football players say that fear of not ever being the way they were before, like they might have lived in a shack and their mother didn't have this and the mother didn't have that. Well, that's a fear that drives them to perform well because they don't ever want to do that again. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect
But
sense.
that's how, and I guess I went a little too far, but I
No,
wanted
no,
to,
that
I
makes
wanted to just show you how that fear, it can drive, it can drive, but we're trying to find security now. So let me go back to that.
okay.
So we're step forward with security in the face of fear. So that's where we are now.
The thing that's becoming apparent to me as we talk through this.
And go ahead. That's the next thing I'm going to talk about is communication with transparency. That's what I just did.
So go ahead. Go ahead.
But no, I just wanted to just bring that in there. Fear thrives on silence and secrecy.
I understand that.